What's happening, guys? This is Joe with McPicks, here to break down UFC Fight Night, Sergey Spivak taking on Derrick Lewis. So we have 12 scheduled fights. This card takes place at the UFC Apex in Las Vegas, which, keep in mind, is the smaller octagon. The start time for this card is kind of interesting. Even though the event is in Vegas, the start time is actually 10 p.m. EST for the prelims and 1 a.m. for the main card, which is going to be tough to stay up for an East Coaster like myself. But I believe the unusual start time is to cater towards some of the Asian fan base because we have the Road to UFC finals on this card. With that being said, it's not the best card to come back to from both a fan perspective and a betting perspective after we had a week break. There are definitely a few low-level fights and a bunch of guys making their UFC debut. So I mentioned this on Twitter, but there are definitely a few bets I like from a prop perspective. But me personally, I think I'm going to end up staying away from a straight bet or moneyline perspective. So let's get into the breakdown. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel when you get a chance. Also, I want to preface this video by saying that there's a lot of unknown names in this card, so I'm probably going to butcher some of the pronunciation, but you'll get the gist of it. So, first matchup, Jesus Aguilar taking on Tatsuro Taira. And Taira is the massive favorite. This is the widest fight in the card from a betting perspective. He's minus 1,200, and Jesus is plus 750. So, although it is a crazy line on the young Japanese fighter, it's a tough UFC debut for Jesus Aguilar because I think Taira looks pretty legit. So like I said, this line opened a little bit out of control with Taira being a massive favorite, but he definitely has a number of advantages in this spot. First of all, in regards to Jesus Aguilar, if there were a men's strawweight class, then he'd be fighting at it because I'm not trying to knock him or anything, but this guy's pretty small. He's 5'4" with a 62-inch reach. That's like almost Corey McKenna status, if you guys know who she is. Taira has a 3-inch height advantage and a sizable 8-inch reach advantage, which is huge for this weight class. He's also super young at 22, 23 years old, and he's seemingly improving with each fight. So he has okay striking. He's long, he's rangy, but really his grappling is where he excels. And he's super crafty in the mat. He has multiple ways to get to the fight down to the mat. He has traditional wrestling, but he's also good at taking the back and standing or off the cage in these unorthodox ways, and he definitely looks for the finish. Jesus also looks to be a predominant grappler. He has good cardio, he's aggressive, but he's definitely outmatched in regards to jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu. We even saw in his Contender Series fight, he was put in a bunch of compromised positions and was deep in a couple of submissions against a guy who's really not known for his jiu-jitsu. He's more so known for his striking. And this type of fighting style definitely won't work against a guy like Taira, who's very dangerous on the mat. So I like Taira inside the distance or even the under 2.5 rounds here, depending on what it opens at. So the prediction for me is going to be Taira via submission. Next matchup, we have Junyoung Park taking on Dennis Tululin. And Park is the favorite. He is minus 195, and Tululin is plus 165. So I like Park in this matchup for a few main reasons. He's a better grappler, he has better cardio, and I just like him because he's an overall well-rounded fighter. Tululin is more of like a zombie, kind of just marches forward, throws hard shots, but leaves himself wide open to being countered with a not-so-impressive 42% striking defense. But I got to say, he definitely is tough. He typically loses via submission, but his two most recent losses are against two highly touted prospects in Kizraev and Ali Skarov. But Tululin puts a lot of pressure. He forces action, and he has a really good finish rate of 90%. So originally I was extremely sold on the fight doesn't go the distance, but if you take a look at Park, he's just not the biggest finisher, and he's pretty tough himself. But Tululin doesn't have the best cardio, so if there is a finish on the Park side, I see it being, in the second or maybe early third, late third. But I could see Park taking him down and grinding him out. So I actually do have a bet on this fight already. I have half a unit on the under 2.5 rounds because it opened at plus money, or right now it's sitting around plus 120 on DraftKings, which, like I said, I think it's a good, decent spot, but I can also see an avenue where Park just kind of grinds him out. But because Tululin forces the action, has been finished himself, and Park also has been finished himself, I think the under is a decent spot. Decent spot. So the prediction is going to be Park via submission. Next fight, we have Mandy Bohm taking on Ji Yeon Kim. And I'm not gonna lie, I need an extra coffee to tape this fight and look into this fight. It's not the most exciting matchup we have seen. But let's take a look at the line here. Kim is the favorite at minus 265, and Bohm is the underdog at plus 225. So Kim actually has a lot of advantages in this matchup: clear output advantage in striking, speed advantage, experience or level of competition advantage, cardio advantage, in my opinion, and I think she's the more durable fighter. I'm really not sure what Mandy Bohm does well, to be honest. She's low volume, she's slow, and she generally just looks weak and kind of floppy in the cage. She has a decent jab, and really that's about it. If you look back at her two UFC fights, she lost 30-27 unanimously to both Lipsky and Victoria Leonardo. Not a good look. With that being said, there's no way I'm playing a fighter like Kim at minus 300. She gets into a lot of close fights and tends to lose via decision, probably because of her. She doesn't really have she doesn't really have a lot of damaging strikes, and the judges obviously don't like that. The only path to victory I see for Bohm is if she can take Kim down and grind her out. I like the over 2.5 rounds here, which is actually a little bit juiced, but I just don't see an avenue where Bohm finishes Kim, who is very tough. So I think a smart thing to do, if you play the over 2.5 rounds, you can also bet Kim finish only or Kim cards no action as like a safety net, which is more likely than a push. So I actually took the over 2.5 rounds at minus 360. I have one parlay so far on this card. It's my first leg of my parlay, and we'll talk about the second leg coming up. But for this fight, my predictions can be a decision. Okay, next we have the first of the Road to UFC finals matchup. We have, and here we go, Hyun Sung Park taking on Seon Guk Choi. Park is the minus 195 favorite. Choi is the plus 165 underdog. So this is, like I said, there's a lot of low-level fights on this card, and this is one of them. It's really tough to pick a side with conviction or confidence. So Park looks to be the more aggressive of the two. He's big for the weight class, and he definitely uses his size and an advantage, especially when it comes to the grappling exchanges, which I like. Choi is more of a decision guy. He seems relatively well-rounded, but really nothing too impressive. Park does look decent in the grappling. He puts on solid pressure on his opponents, and besides that, I actually thought he looked pretty slow with his strikes. This is a fight where I don't think it's a bad idea to take the underdog given its low level, but I'm going to pick Park here because I believe he's the stronger, better grappler with more finishing upside. Even though this is a flyweight bout, the favorited fighter in Park has an 86% finish rate. So if you're looking to bet this fight, I would actually consider the under 2.5 rounds at pretty good plus money. I believe it's around plus 190 right now. But at the end of the day, the prediction is going to be Park via sub, but it's definitely low confidence. Next up, we have Rinya Nakamura taking on Toshiomi Kazama. And the line for this one, let's take a look here. Nakamura is the favorite, sizable favorite at minus 425, with Kazama coming back at plus 340. So here's another matchup of two fighters making their UFC debut off the road to UFC promotion. Nakamura looks to be a well-rounded prospect out of Japan with power in his hands. Kazama, on the other hand, is more of a grappler, looks to get to the fight down to the mat, rack up control time, and lock up a submission. I agree with Nakamura being the favorite, but man, this line is wide. He's undefeated, but he's only 6-0, so he's inexperienced. There's another fight where it's tough to be confident on either side, but there's an avenue to target this fight from a betting perspective. And again, like I mentioned earlier, it's from a prop. So I like the under 2.5 rounds here, and I actually already locked it in at minus 155 for 1.55 units to win 1 unit. Nakamura is a finisher, and Kazama is an aggressive fighter who has been knocked out before and is a finisher himself. So I'm expecting violence here. Prediction is going to be Nakamura via knockout. So next we have Jung Lee versus Jia Yi. And the line for this one, Yi is the underdog at plus 210. And Li Jiang is the favorite at minus 250. Again, another one where it's confusing to differentiate between the fighters because we don't know them yet. But the first thing I noticed about Young Lee is he's dangerous and he forces the action. He has power in his hands and he threatens with submissions, typically the armbar. He has, I believe, all of his submission wins are by armbar. Out of his last 5 fights, 4 of the last 5 have finished in the first round. And the fight that he won by decision was an absolute war. This guy's really, really volatile. Jia Yi looks to be more of a grappler. He wants to get the fight down to the mat and grind out his opponent or look for the submission. So from a betting perspective, I would not take Lee as a minus 250 favorite. Like I said, it's another spot where it's almost like underdog or pass. Lee is just too volatile of a fighter. And when the fight is relatively low level, it's not a bad idea to take the predominant grappler at a decent underdog price. With that being said, I believe a sneaky way to target this fight is by taking Young Lee by submission. This dude is really aggressive and fast with his armbar setup, and I've seen him attempt the armbar submission from both bottom and from the top position, essentially after, getting like a club and sub where he hurts his fighter on the feet and then he locks up a submission on the mat. And I think he's going to get the opportunity to attempt a sub because Jia Yi will likely force his wrestling. He's more of a grappler. So the prediction is going to be Young Lee via submission. Although, like I said, I wouldn't hate, if you took a shot on Jia Yi since he's the potential minute winner. Okay, and the next fight is the final Road to UFC matchup. Jeka Saraji taking on Anshul JUBLI. And let's take a look at the matchup. I believe this is one of the more closely lined fights on the card. We have JUBLI is the favorite at minus 115. Saraji is the underdog at minus 105. So it's almost a pick 'em here. But again, 2 guys making the UFC debut. Pretty low-level fight here, so not going to have a ton of conviction or confidence in the pick. JUBLI is fighting out of India. We don't have a lot of fighters in the UFC out of India. But he's inexperienced with only 6 professional fights. But he looks to be well-rounded, and he's tough. He has good cardio. Jeka, on the other hand, is more of a finisher with an 83% finish rate. Looks to be the more powerful and polished striker. But I'm actually going to take JUBLI in this matchup. He's the bigger fighter. He's got a 4-inch height advantage. He's training at a Tiger Muay Thai. So you got to think that his striking is improving, and he may be able to get his grappling going, as we've seen him do that on the regional scene. Like I said earlier, not much confidence at all here. May even look to change my pick, but for now, the pick is going to be JUBLI via decision. All right, next we have Adam Fugit taking on Yusaku Kinoshita. And Kinoshita is the favorite at minus 285. Fugit is the underdog at plus 240. So when I first looked into this fight, I like Kinoshita, and I was looking to bet him. And I actually, when I researched this fight, Kinoshita was sitting at minus 205 on DraftKings. But I went to Best Fight Odds, and I saw all the money was coming in on Fugit. So I'm like, you know what? All the money's coming in on him. Let me wait a little bit to play Kinoshita. I went to work. I got back, and Kinoshita was a minus like 280, 270 favorite at best, and Fugit even the line even got wider. So lesson learned: when you like a fighter and you think it's a decent price, take the shot. Don't wait it out. But to get into this matchup, I like Kinoshita quite a bit in this spot. Usually I look to fade the guy coming off a Contender Series victory, but not here. He's young. He's 23 years old. Really good striking, good head movement, solid defense, quick hands, and big power. He's got a 100% finish rate. He has one loss on his record, but if you look into it, that was actually due to a disqualification. It was actually pretty brutal. He was grabbing the fence and essentially kicking the guy in the face, and he got DQ'd, I believe, because of he was holding onto the fence, and it was really oblivious. But Fugit, on the other hand, is 34 years old, coming off a knockout loss to Michael Morales in his UFC debut. To give him credit, he made a decent account for himself in his debut. I just don't think he's very good. He's slow and awkward on the feet. He's been knocked out in 2 of his 3 losses, so durability is a concern, and he's hittable. My main concern with backing Kinoshita is if Fugit gets his wrestling and grappling going, as we've seen Kinoshita taken down on the regional scene, but he has a lot of urgency to get back on his feet, and he has a good get-up game, as well as a bunch of submissions in his amateur career, so I like that. Both guys are aggressive and tend to press the action, which is, as you know, a recipe for violence. Kinoshita, 100% finish rate, like I mentioned earlier. Fugit, 88% finish rate. With that being said, I love the under 2.5 rounds in this fight, or the fighters go the distance. I actually already locked it in. I got 2.5 units on the under 2.5 rounds at minus 130. I believe it's available at minus 140 on DraftKings right now. And Kinoshita on the money line at minus 280 is also my second leg of the parlay that I spoke about earlier. I have 1.5 units on the over 2.5 rounds in the Kim in the Bone fight, plus Kinoshita money line, which comes out to about minus 136, minus 137. So the prediction here is going to be Kinoshita by knockout. Next, we have a banger of a fight, the return of Doo-Ho Choi taking on Kyle Nelson. So Choi is the favorite. He's currently minus 190. Kyle Nelson plus 160. So overall, an interesting matchup. Both fighters are predominant strikers with solid power. Choi was a big-time prospect out of South Korea that got a lot of attention and respect from the odds makers after he won his first 3 fights in the UFC by first-round knockout. But he hasn't fought in over 3 years. I originally thought that it was because of he was obligated to perform his mandatory military service in South Korea, similar to what the Korean Zombie had to do, but I believe he was actually out due to injury. Either way, a long layoff like that is always concerning. Speaking of the Korean Zombie, Choi fights similar to him, in my opinion. He manages distance well, looks for the counter. Not a lot of dynamic movement because he seems to like to conserve his energy well and look for the counter shot. But he has really sharp striking. Kyle Nelson also hits hard, but this comes at a price, as his cardio is definitely not the best. He made a decent account for himself in his last fight, up a weight class against Jai Herbert. He actually won the first round, but again, he just slowed down and ended up losing via unanimous decision. The thing about both Choi and Nelson is that they hit hard and they tend to brawl, but they both lack the durability. This is why I favor the violence in this spot. Both guys have been finished in the majority of their losses in the UFC. So actually, I already have a play on the under 2.5 rounds. I believe I got it at minus 140. I have 2 units on that. From a moneyline perspective, I favor Choi because I do believe he's the much more technical striker with higher output and better cardio, but at the end of the day, it's tough to back him at juice coming off a long layoff from an injury. And Nelson actually has the higher grappling upside, as he does occasionally shoot for takedowns, but you just can't trust his cardio. Either way, expecting a finish here. Prediction, Choi via knockout. Next fight, we have Blagoy Ivanov taking on Marcin Tybura, 2 old veterans of the sport going at it here. TYBURA is the minus 150 favorite currently, and Ivanov is the plus 130 underdog, and a lot of line movement on this one. TYBURA opened up as a sizable favorite, minus 185, got as low as around minus 200. A lot of money coming in on Ivanov at this point, and you can, if you take a look at the fight, you can understand why. But getting into detail, TYBURA, he's actually going to have a pretty substantial size advantage, 4 inches of height, 5 inches of reach. He's the more active fighter. He's been around the UFC for a longer period. But both guys, in general, have fought a solid level of competition. But overall, I feel like TYBURA has more ways to win. He's well-rounded, mixes up the martial arts well. Ivanov, on the other hand, also well-rounded, but he's more of a boxing type, whereas Marcin shows more variety in his striking, and he's more likely to implement grappling, in my opinion. So although I favor TYBURA to win the fight, I think a sneaky way to bet this fight is by targeting Ivanov finish only or money line, finish only money line or scorecards equals no action, which means that if Ivanov gets the finish, the bet cashes. If TYBURA finishes Ivanov, it's a loss, but if the fight goes to decision, it's voided. It's a push. So Ivanov is one of the most durable guys in the UFC, and he's fought some absolute killers and hard hitters, and he's never been finished or even knocked down in the UFC. TYBURA, on the other hand, doesn't have the best durability. He hasn't finished by knockout in 4 of his 5 losses, and we've seen him hurt wobbled on other occasions as well. I think the finish only for Ivanov will open at a decent price since, he's yet to get a finish in the UFC, but he can be aggressive at times, and he actually does have a 64% finish rate overall. So the prediction is actually going to be TYBURA by decision, but I'm going to keep an eye out for what Ivanov finish only opens at. I usually get that on DraftKings. I'm hoping it's going to be a good price. I'll probably put a unit on that, but overall prediction, TYBURA via decision. Next, we have Daeun Jung taking on Devin Clark. Pretty good fight here. Daeun Jung is the favorite, currently sitting at anywhere between -200, -250. Devin Clark, underdog, between around +185, +190. So we have a predominant striker versus a predominant grappler in this matchup. Jung is the way bigger fighter, 4-inch height advantage and a 3-inch reach advantage. He's more dangerous with an impressive 86% finish rate, majority of them being by knockout. He was actually just knocked out for the first time in his career against a really good fighter, skilled kickboxer in Dustin Jacoby. But looking back on that fight, I think Jung got a bit cocky and kind of complacent in that after landing some good shots of his own. His guard was low, and he got caught and dropped. But Jung won't have to worry about getting caught too much in this matchup. Devin Clark has an underwhelming 39% finish rate, which is terrible for the light heavyweight division. However, Clark is going to be the best wrestler by far that Jung has fought, but you can't be fully confident that he's going to utilize his wrestling. I actually had a bet on Clark in his previous fight at a good underdog price. He was fighting the striker Murzakanov in his last fight, but Clark was getting beat up on the feet, didn't even attempt a takedown. So you gotta, that's a concern right there. Jung himself has some wrestling, as he was able to take down William Knight 8 times, spamming the same exact outside trip takedown. Clark is tough, but he has been finished in 6 of his 7 losses, has a 44% striking defense, which does not bode well for him in this matchup since Jung is a heavy hitter. One concerning aspect for Jung is that we haven't seen much of his defensive grappling. On paper, he has a 88% takedown defense, but he hasn't really faced many wrestlers. And it was actually a bad look when he fought Kadis Ibrahimov, who was exhausted in the later rounds, but still able to control Jung and take him down. But that fight was 3 to 4 years ago, so Jung might have tightened that area up a little bit. But in conclusion, you have to side with Jung given his physical advantages, finishing upside, striking advantage, and durability advantage. Jung inside the distance or Jung finish only are both good looks in my opinion from a betting perspective, but the official prediction will be Jung by KO. And I'll be monitoring the inside the distance line whenever it opens. Okay, next we have the main event, Derrick Lewis taking on Sergey Spivak. And Spivak is a decent sized favorite, -230. Derrick Lewis is +195 currently on DraftKings. So I think it's relatively tough to feel overly confident on either side here. Spivak looks to be on an upward career trajectory, putting on solid performances in his previous 2 fights, whereas Lewis is kind of on a downward slope. He's getting older, he's getting knocked out in his previous 2 fights. But if you take a look at who these guys fought recently, Lewis fought 2 really heavy-handed strikers in Pavlovich and Bam Bam Tai Tuivasa, whereas Spivak has fought 2 guys with 0 ground game in Greg Hardy, not even in the UFC before, and Augusto Sakai, not even sure if he's in the UFC anymore, where he's able to easily take them down and ground and pound them out. So although Derrick has an unimpressive 55% takedown defense. He's tough. He's really tough to finish on the ground and has these weirdly effective unorthodox get-ups where he essentially is able to just use his brute strength, push guys off of him, and stand up. If you haven't seen it, YouTube it. It's kind of funky. But when Derrick Lewis is finishing fights, he's typically hurt on the feet and knocked out. Sergey Spivak is not really a power puncher. He typically gets fights. He definitely gets his finishes on the ground. This total is currently set at 1.5 rounds. I have a bet on the over 1.5 rounds, which I like here, and I got it at minus 105 at 1.5 units on it. So Sergey, he's been knocked out twice in the feet, but it was against an extremely aggressive fighter in Tom Aspinall, which Sergey took on short notice, and again against Walt Harris in his UFC debut. Derrick Lewis can knock anyone out, but he traditionally is not like a overly aggressive fighter. And I actually think he's going to start off a bit tentative here, given he was finished in his previous 2 fights. It's also Spivak's first 5-round main event, so he may start slow as well, taking into consideration energy conservation. So in terms of a pick, you have to favor Spivak, given the grappling upside. He seems to be improving with each fight, and the fact that Derrick Lewis is 37 and seemingly on his way out. But you can never count out the power of Derrick Lewis. And actually, if you're looking on his social media, he looks super slim. I don't know what he's going to weigh in at, but he looks like he shaved off 30, 40 pounds. So I'm curious to see the weigh-ins and how he looks in the scale. So pick's going to be Spivak by late finish. But personally, I like the over 1.5 rounds, and I have 1.5 units on it at minus 105. But prediction, Spivak by KO. So that about does it. Again, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, follow me on Twitter at McPicks is where I post all my bets and my analysis. And as always, good luck.